Eviction Moratorium expires October 3rd, 2021. A system where billionaires in America made $1.8 trillion in 16 months during COVID. 1 out of 5 renters are behind in rent, and 1 out of 6 children suffer food insecurity. A system that would even attempt to enforce massive evictions isn't a system worth saving. As Martin Luther King once said, "We are saying that something is wrong with capitalism. There must be a better distribution of wealth, and maybe America must move toward a democratic socialism." These are the days of resistance, a national campaign that calls on all of those of goodwill to get up, get out, and do something. Get out of the notion that we are ever returning to normal. Get out and camp out in public spaces in cities across America, or on your own front yard for one long night in a show of rebellious solidarity that seeks to encourage people to get up and get out and intervene in immoral evictions. On October 3rd, a people's concert of indie media, national artists, and activists will broadcast a live stream production called Days of Resistance that will celebrate our collective struggle and draw a line in the dirt and challenge the old way of capitalistic thinking of profit over people, exposing absurdity of having money for war but can't feed the poor unless they are filling the largest prison systems in the entire world. Join us.
I get out of all your boxes. I get out.
All right, peace world. It's Patrick Kamon Freeman, Angry Black Man in Therapy, representing We Act Radio. We are here because it's necessary for us to rise to the occasion to address the fierce urgency of now. There has been a nationwide action taking place September 24th to 26th. There was only 60 actions that took place nationwide to protest, to make it clear that people across the country wanted Congress to act immediately to halt the eviction crisis. They raised demands for indefinite eviction moratorium, the cancellation of rent debt, and faster disbursement of relief funds. Organizers went into the streets in cities and towns, big and small, to make their voices heard. Rallies were enthusiastically received by working people and counting the actions, many of whom stopped to join in. Council rent organizers are determined to continue the struggle and already hard at work helping tenants resist evictions that violate their fundamental rights. And here to join us today, I am so honored to have her with us, is Emmy Lockwood from cancelrent.org. She's one of the great young voices that's leading the way. And before I bring Emmy on, I want to make sure that we're also aware that there are historical precedents for what the people are demanding. Martin Luther King, the great Martin Luther King, we're all familiar with his last speech, but his next to his last speech was actually delivered right here in Washington, D.C., March 31st, 1968. It was entitled Remaining Awake During a Great Revolution. He goes on to say that far too often, many people find themselves living in periods of great social change, but yet they fail to develop the new ideas and new mental responses that the new situation demands. They end up sleeping through a revolution. And the speech he was unable to make, the next speech that he was going to make before he was assassinated by government forces in this country, was entitled, America Too May Go to Hell. And this is an excerpt from the speech he was never able to make. He says that I come to say that America too is going to hell if she doesn't use her wealth. If America does not use her resources of wealth to end poverty and make it possible for all of God's children to have the basic necessities of life, she too will go to hell. Now, that is the climate that we're living in. The Pentagon budget has been increased. Billionaires have doubled their net worth in 16 months, and we're actually having to demand that they do the right thing in the midst of the greatest pandemic in 100 years to stop entertaining profit over people and evict 1 out of 6 renters in America. That is where we are. Emmy Lockwood from cancelrent.org, we turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to talk and to spread the message that it's now time to organize in a mass setting and connect with neighbors, family members, friends. It's very urgent that we do this because, as you said, 1 out of 6 renters right now are at risk, could be evicted within the next year. I believe in DC, about 18,000 people are likely to be evicted in the next 2 months alone. Meanwhile, there are 10,000 housing units that are empty in this city. So there is absolutely no excuse, no reason, no rationality for these evictions. And housing is an umbrella issue for so many other issues. And that's why we must all unite and fight for what's right.
Okay, Emmy, we have a comment here from Orlando McCall. Thank you for your comment. He goes on to say, so you want the property owners to pay their rent. This is a popular position, or maybe have the property owner go into foreclosure. I do not know how any of this is benefiting the property owners. Again, that is the old way of thinking of profit over people, but I'll allow you to answer that and then I will respond.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for the comment and the question. I mean, this is something that's been brought up a lot when we speak to people on the streets, but I'd like to remind you that there are actually $49 billion of federally allocated money to assist landlords, property owners during this time, and only 11% of that money is being filled out by landlords. So to access this money, you need both renters and landlords to landlords aren't filling it out because they want tenants to be evicted, and then they can bring someone in who at a higher rate of the lease. So that's why we are demanding canceling the rents. The money is there, but for landlords that say, like, you know, they're losing money, that's just not the case. Like, the money's there to support them and cover their mortgages. Yeah.
Well, let me unpack that a little bit. First, let me say that here we at Radio, we reject the term landlord. This is not a feudal system. We are not serfs. There's no lords over us. You own the property, not the people. So there's no landlord. So we're gonna change the whole dichotomy with that, change the language. And secondly, the whole notion, this puritanical notion that we have been operating under this unrestrained capitalist system for far too long is that if you don't work, you don't eat, right? Okay, well, that worked when there was more work than people that needed to be done. But now we're in a situation where there's no living wages for the work that is available for people to do. And so now we have to get into a democratic socialist framework because there's no justification whatsoever. As you so illustriously pointed out, there's thousands of unused units in not only this city or across the country. It's probably less than 50% occupancy in any of these cities where you're seeing massive gentrification and displacement, at least. And the notion that these small building owners are somehow losing. Okay, yes, the small mom and pop operations should be made whole as well. Those mortgages can be easily pushed back like receding hairlines. That's not hard to do. That is a red herring. The real issue is the vast majority, yes, numerically, it may be more small property owners than the big boys, but most of the property is owned by the big boys. And when you talk about multi-million-dollar corporations of people that don't even live in the city, some of them don't even live in the country, how about that? They should eat the loss, absolutely eat it. The small business owners should be made whole. It should not be pitting working people against each other. And that is how capitalism has perpetuated itself. And this is the debate that we're talking about. Capitalism itself is now on trial because it's the opposing notion. Is it people over profit or profit over people? All right, and that's the coming to Jesus moment that we're about to have. I'm going through the comments here because this is participatory journalism. We have Michael Behrman. Money is there to pay the back rent, but only 11. He's repeating and reiterating what you so illustriously point out. You want to take a moment to talk more about why you think some of the formerly known as landlords, now simply property owners, are not taking advantage of the money that's available to them?
Yeah, I can expand a bit more. So the money's there, right? There's a federal pot of money. Property owners get a profit, right? They purchase extra homes to let out at a higher rate than the mortgage. And so most of the country has like rules about, you can't increase rents by more than, I think 10% is the standard per year. And so property owners are, as a renter, as a tenant, you are paying for their mortgage, and you're paying them a little bit of bonus, right? They don't charge you exactly what the mortgage is. They charge you a couple hundred extra for their, extra Corvette or whatnot. So that's the system that we're fighting against. Like, this property system is real. It as you said, it really shows like the worst of capitalism. And that's why we believe in building a mass movement to fight the system, connect with all sorts of housing issues, and get the people feeling like they're not alone, right? This can be such an isolating experience, and we want to remind them that there is community, that there are opportunities outside of this capitalist system, and that's what we want.
Well, I think that we are in the last stages of capitalism, and we clearly are in the last stages of the American empire. All empires fall, and we should not, get so uncomfortable about America no longer being an empire. France was an empire, now they're just a country. Great Britain was an empire, now they're just a country. And I think it's about time that America becomes a country rather than an empire, because then they will have their priorities straight to take care of home. And we need to realize that the corporate Democrats are standing in the way of progress in this country. And I think they have been strategically placed to ensure to maintain the status quo. We're going to have one of your colleagues joining us here shortly. But is there any issue that you feel passionately about that's not getting addressed in this conversation?
Yeah, I guess speaking a little bit about the international aspect to this, I've heard a lot on the street that people think that Chinese investors are buying up the property, and that's actually, I think, first of all, I think it's a bit racist. Second of all, it's not backed up by statistics. I think it's 0.7% of properties right now are owned by like Chinese people, but that's not what's causing this housing crisis at all, and we should fight against xenophobia.
Okay, we have your colleague here trying to join us, Shihan Mohammed from the Party for Socialism and Liberation. If you could take the baton, I'm sorry, I should have gave you that notification when I asked you your question. He's sending in a request to join. And let's see if I see that. I don't see the requests.
I could also talk about the Pentagon a little bit in comparison to our housing needs. Mm-hmm. To keep our families housed, to solve the problem, right? It's only 8% of the annual Pentagon budget, which is nothing. Pentagon gets trillions and trillions of dollars. We can't even fathom that type of money. And it's as you said again, like, it shows this capitalist system like barefaced, like how horrible it is and why we need to push for something else.
So they get trillions of dollars. The Pentagon budget went up. They spent $300 million every day, or as we like to say in Washington, D.C., every day for 20 years. And now, as we know, the great philosopher Tupac Shakur says, they got money for war but can't feed the poor. Joining us here today, we just got him on, is Shihan Muhammad. So glad to have you on, brother. Sorry for the delay. Welcome to the virtual version of WEAC Radio. And for those who just joined us, WEAC Radio is sponsoring a bike ride. It's a gathering this Sunday at 3 p.m. On the radical side of Martin King Avenue at 3 p.m. We're rolling out at 4, going to the Capitol, making a joyful noise, raising this issue through the streets of Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. We were making a stop at the Black Lives Matter Plaza to emphasize the fact that the average white family in Washington, D.C. has 81 times the wealth of the average black family in Washington, D.C. So at least in the nation's capital, this is a black and white issue. And we want to make sure that we put some paint where it ain't, because Martin Luther King said, a nation that continues to spend, well, let's make sure I repeat it verbatim. How about this? A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual doom. I think that is the last stages of capitalism. Shihan, the floor is yours, brother.
Yeah, no, I'm here representing the Party for, the Party for Socialism and Liberation and canceltherants.org, here with Emmy. And I think that something that is so important to actually building this kind of movement is to really have a sense of optimism. And I think it's incredibly hard during these times. It's difficult to blame anyone for you sort of being down and not really having faith in kind of movement work. But we have to understand too that that's exactly what the rulers of this city and of this country and of this world want us to do. They want us to give in to a sort of pessimistic nihilism, so that we don't bother to stand up and fight with each other and collectively organize against that machine.
Right.
And you think about it, we outnumber them, not even just barely, we outnumber them vastly. This is something that we can do, but it's a matter of raising consciousness and talking to the people and making sure that they understand that we collectively can actually organize. Some of the things that I've learned just canvassing, working with tenants unions and talking to actual tenants, is that so many of them have already they've already entered into these social organizations, tenants associations and whatnot, and we're seeing their lives actually materially improve just by being involved or even being in proximity to these orgs. There's one org that I know that I'm working with that does weekly food deliveries to those who are food insecure. That makes a load of difference, and it actually gets people to truly understand that, hey, we actually can do this. We actually are not alone in this fight. And even marches like the one that we demonstrated and that we demonstrated on the way towards the Wilson building in front of Muriel Bowser's office last weekend, even things like those are what get people to understand that no, they're not alone, because coverage of that leads other people to want to do more instead of just reading the news and moping around and stuff like that. But also, we want to keep in mind that despite all this optimism, we're also trying to be realistic with what's the current situation right now, right? There was a Yahoo article that was released on Monday, and here are some of the stats that I read from it. It said about 3.7 million people say they feel it is somewhat or very likely they'll be tossed out in the next 2 months. That's just in this country alone. The Census Bureau reports that nearly 7.7 million Americans are behind on their rent. And in Washington, D.C. in particular, we have 122,000 people behind on rent, with 18.5 thousand very likely to face eviction in the next 2 months. Okay, and if we look at the further demographics of that, we'll see too that this is predominantly represented by minorities, black people and brown people who, you know, don't have many opportunities for upward mobility in this country just because of our you know, our racist and classist legacy. But where the housing crisis has been so problematic in the rest of the country, here in DC, it's metastasized into something that is its own just obscene monster. So we are realistic about this. We are very practical, and we know exactly what we're up against. And perhaps I think that's where some of these people get this nihilism. They think, they see us and they think, oh, you know, they're fighting over nothing. They don't even realize the gravity of the situation. No, actually, we do realize the gravity of the situation.
Absolutely.
Because we talk to the people. We are out here canvassing, asking if they need rental assistance, asking if they need food assistance. And we know that ultimately, even just the few of us that have decided to actually organize or have the capacity to organize make a huge difference. And every single day, every event, every action that we hold just grows our numbers even more and more as the situation continues to worsen. So overall, just revolutionary optimism. That's kind of the underlying point.
Jihan, I'm glad you brought up the pushback or what we like to call the backlash. Or those people don't know what they're doing. They're just optimistic. They're not economists. They're uninformed. They're unintelligent. Those are the stereotypes that they're going to rely on. But the fact of the matter is, they said those same tropes about the Occupy Wall Street movement. All right, and that what brought us the whole world, the consciousness of the 1% versus the 99%. Right, and now on the 10th anniversary of Occupy Wall Street, the same exact day, Joe Biden, the president, says the 1% needs to start paying their fair share of taxes. Okay, it only took a decade, and a pandemic to bring capitalism to its knees for them to admit what they were saying then, and that's what we're talking about, because they're in their desperation, they're gonna try to minimize, and we need to realize, unfortunately, it's gonna take a long time, but time is on our side, and my proof that time is on our side, I want to share another quote, because I like to bring in precedents for our struggle. Because this is not something new. This is an old struggle. This class struggle is something that has been going on for far too long. And I just want to bring in Milton Friedman, who was not a friend of the progressive community whatsoever. But even a broke clock is right 2 times a day, okay? He goes on to say, only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. When that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depend on the ideas that are laying around. That, I believe, is our basic function, to develop alternatives to existing policies, to keep them alive and available until the politically impossible becomes the politically inevitable. All right? Now, usually, they never let a good crisis go to waste, and it benefits the power structure. I submit to you that this crisis has not gone to waste, and it's benefiting the people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I turn it back over.
You mentioned precedent too. What people don't realize is that there is actually a precedent for for the national government to help with the housing crisis. During the Great Depression, I believe, there was a 5-year eviction moratorium on, was it Michigan? I think Emmy knows for sure.
Michigan and Wisconsin, 2 states.
2 states. They were able to implement a 5-year eviction moratorium. There's no reason why we can't bring that back into the modern century. But right now, it's a matter of getting people and their political imagination to understand that these things.
Ooh, I love that. Political imagination. I love that. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just got to add real quick. Political imagination is, I'm going to run with that. I'm going to figure out how to quote you every time I say it, but you have just did a paradigm shift there, brother. And I'm going to tell you why. Because Albert Einstein said that imagination is more important than knowledge. So back to that trope, oh, they don't know what they're talking about, they don't know what they're, you need to exercise your political imagination. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, of course.
And who does it serve to say, like, who does it serve to be negative? It serves the capitalist class, the ruling class. They want you to stop to believe in things that divide us, right? We're all like the working class. We can unite and fight together, and as one unit, we will overcome them. And to talk a little bit more about like the historical precedent, there are also other factors that have a lot of parallels with the Great Depression. For example, they also destroyed a large amount of food during the Great Depression. Like the ruling class would destroy crops that could not be sold for surplus.
What?
Back over 100 years ago, right? And we saw like 2 days ago.
They wouldn't even let them eat cake.
They would not let them.
They wouldn't even let them eat cake.
We have so much food, and we can feed so many. We can feed the world. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's been a long-held reality, that we have enough food production in the world to feed everyone, to ensure there's no world hunger. But because there's no profit motive, there's no profit incentive in that, we're okay with just dumping millions of tons of food, quite literally burying it into the ground. I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, there were articles upon articles of farming companies taking just huge mounds of potatoes, burying them in the ground. Why? They weren't going to sell.
And policemen will guard trash cans, the industrial size dumping grounds. They'll put policemen there so that the hungry people cannot go and get the food, right? Mm-hmm. The police function to preserve the property and stop people from eating. It's horrible.
Exactly.
Yeah. I want to share a little something with you guys. I'm practicing my junior eldership as being a little older than you guys. But October 16th, 2002 was a watershed moment for me, because it was my first day after I got fired from the post office for making anti-war statements. And that's when I started. That was my last job. And I'm at the unemployment office, October 16, 2002, unsure what I'm going to do with my life. I'm like, I'm really scared. I don't know what's about to happen. And it was good reason. I did eventually lose everything I monetarily owned. But once you lose everything you own, then you fear nothing. Once you lose everything, you fear nothing. And then I think people are still holding on to what they knew pre-COVID capitalism because they don't want to lose something. But it gives you freedom. So I'm in the unemployment office, and this man from Canada actually explains to me how capitalism works. And this is how he described it. He says, in America, they have to maintain a significant amount of unemployment in the workforce. And in order to maintain that sufficient a number of unemployed is to keep the wages down. Because if you want the people to be just hungry enough and desperate enough to take a low-paying job, because it's all there is, he said, because if everybody was employed, then wages would go up. Exactly. You wouldn't take a job unless you was doing what? Making more money or doing something that you love. So they have to enforce a significant number of unemployed in the percentage in order for capitalism to continue to exploit and expand, and its unrestrained efforts to maximize profit at all costs. And the people need to understand that capitalism at its root is designed to maximize profit at all costs. And when you apply that to the healthcare industry, it gets real sadistic. When applied to what you just described in of an emergency where food is scarce, it gets sadistic. And I submit to you that capitalism itself is sadistic. We've seen this. They call it, price gouging. We saw it during the pandemic. People were charging $50 for a case of water, But when it's applied to insulin, increased 800%, it's called healthcare, free enterprise, free market, and so we are basically saying that capitalism is on trial. We just got a few more moments here. I want to turn the floor back over to you wonderful young people that's picking up the baton and doing such incredible work. I hope that we get an opportunity to push in the same direction more often in the future. But I turn it back over to you guys to take us home.
Of course. So I think something that we can, again, just to emphasize again, that collective action, what we can do is actually unite with each other. We don't necessarily all have to be part of the same, from the same area, from the same contingent, from the same, party background and whatnot, but we have to understand that together we have a united interest in actually that revolution, in ending capitalism, and in securing housing, healthcare, food for everyone. And one of the things that I think has been super helpful has just been working on behalf of the Cancel the Rents campaign. We have canceltherents.org, and even though we just did our National Day of Action, we still have so many more opportunities for outreach and getting people on board and getting more people to join in on this collective action. So again, check out canceltherents.org if that's something that you are interested in helping with. There are so many people who need desperate help, and we can only do it when we have the numbers behind them.
And reintroduce yourself and tell people how they can follow you and your organization, brother.
Yes, so I'm Shihan Mohammed. I am from the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Our Twitter handle, I believe, is PSL Web. Is that correct, Emmy? Okay, PSL Web. We also have a DC chapter, PSL DC, no underscores, all lowercase. And we also have Instagram handles, PSL Web and PSL DC. And we also have a significant amount of learning opportunities, and we have our own newspaper called Liberation News. You can find that at liberationnews.org.
All right. Thank you, brother. And thank you for all the work you do and have done. And I look forward to meeting you in real life and joining forces with you. All right. And last but not least.
Hey there. Thank you so much. Again, we are from canceltherents.org. You can press the sign up tab on the website to register your email and whatnot. There are, over the past weekend, 50 cities, and there were 60 events across the country. So no matter where you are, chances are that there is a branch or a part of the organization that can that you can get involved with. And it doesn't even have to be something big. It could be something small. Personally, I try to practice always acknowledging the other humans around us. And so because this is a housing issue, that means it's really important to start acknowledging the humanity of the person who's sitting outside, maybe your apartment building, whatnot. Even if you don't have cash on hand, it makes a world of a difference to say, hey, sir, hey, ma'am, I hope you have a good day. Take care of yourself. They'll have a smile on their face instantly. And, you always have to start small. So stay in touch with your community.
There's an African proverb: if you ever think that one person can't make a difference, then you never try to go to sleep in a room with a mosquito. All right.
That's great.
I want to apologize to our listener audience. We had a promo video that did not screen share, and because of that, we're going to repost this video with that shortly. So I wanted to thank all of our viewers. I want to encourage Nicole Roussel, Ishaka Ra, Hannibal to chime back in, because your comments were invaluable to this conversation. So if you could continue to follow We Act Radio and submit those comments on the next video so it can stay on the public record when we reload this video. And to Orlando McCall and Shihan, Orlando McCall had the pessimistic point of view that, well, what about the landlords? And I pushed back and said, we no longer subscribe to landlords. You know, this is not feudal Europe. We are not serfs. You own the building, not us. So there's no lord over us. So we rejected that right there. The only Christopher we acknowledge is Wallace, okay? But he went on to say that what about the property owners going into foreclosure? What about the small business owners? And we made the clear distinction. And I think Emmy did a great job in making a clear distinction that a lot of these building owners are not taking advantage of the current money available to them because, again, the sadistic aspect of capitalism. They know they can raise rents exponentially on a new tenant rather than maintaining existing tenants. And so I hope that we change Orlando McCall's point of view and lean more on people over profit and away from profit over people. And also the realization that the main property owners in any area of America are multinational corporations and not mom and pop operations. So mom and pop operations, yes, they should be made whole. You should not be pitting working class people against each other. But the multinational, the multi-million-dollar corporations, they should eat it. Eat it. Like Weird Al Yankovic. Eat it. You know. All right. Any shout outs? This is We Act Radio. We do shout outs. No shout outs?
Oh, shout out to, I think, just all the organizations that were able to show up and endorse us and support us during these days of actions. We had I'm forgetting the list right now. Emmy, do you know them off the top of your head?
Yeah. Thank you so much for all our endorsers, co-collaborators, co-organizers, people we meet on the street. I think people are way kinder on in person than online, so it's great to. There are so many interactions that I'll always remember with people on the street, and I think that's what, as organizers, we learn from. As in terms of endorsers, we had, I think it was 1DC, from the Roots, Brooklyn Manor Coalition. There are a wide variety of opportunities to get engaged with housing struggles, not just with our organization, but with many others here in DC, that, to kind of balance the needs of local issues with the federal issues, because it's DC.
Yeah, local, national, and international. Nothing is truly local in Washington, D.C. because this is the nation's capital. I think it's a litmus test. So goes D.C., so goes the country. And I think that the struggle starts here, the revolution starts here. And I want to close out with quotes from Martin Luther King, because as I said, these are weapons that have been effective for us by bringing in these towering figures, that have been somewhat, commercialized. Martin Luther King was so radical that his own words was blasted off his own monument because it was too much. I mean, I want people to know that his own words was sandblasted off of his monument because it was too much. So I never lose an opportunity to quote from Martin Luther King, because he's supposed to be so loved and revered by all people, but no one wants to deal with his political philosophy. So we'll close out with him. Martin Luther King says, and one day we must ask the question, why are there millions of poor people in America? And when you begin to ask that question, you are raising questions about the economic system, about a broader distribution of wealth. When you ask that question, you begin to question the capitalistic economy. And I'm simply saying that more and more, we got to begin to ask questions about the whole society. We must recognize that we can't solve our problems now until there's a radical redistribution of economic and political power. This means a revolution of values and other things. We must see now that the evils of racism, economic exploitation, and militarism are all tied together. We can't really get rid of one without getting rid of the others. The whole structure of American life must be changed. America is a hypocritical nation, and we must put our own house in order. That is We Act Radio, broadcasting from the radical side of Martin Luther King Avenue. I want to thank these young people for the work they're doing. They're carrying the baton. They're running the race. I'm here to just, hand them cups of Gatorade and root them on and continue to provide this platform to amplify their voices. All right?
Right.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, sister. Stay focused, stay safe, stay strong, stay woke, and enjoy the revolution.
Thank you.
You too.
See you out there.
All right.
Eviction Moratorium expires October 3rd, 2021. A system where billionaires in America made $1.8 trillion in 16 months during COVID. 1 out of 5 renters are behind in rent, and 1 out of 6 children suffer food insecurity. A system that would even attempt to enforce massive evictions isn't a system worth saving. As Martin Luther King once said, we are saying that something is wrong with capitalism. There must be a better distribution of wealth, and maybe America must move toward a democratic socialism. These are the days of resistance, a national campaign that calls on all of those of goodwill to get up, get out, and do something. Get out of the notion that we are ever returning to normal. Get out and camp out in public spaces in cities across America, or on your own front yard for one long night in a show of rebellious solidarity that seeks to encourage people to get up and get out and intervene in immoral evictions. On October 3rd, a people's concert of indie media, national artists, and activists will broadcast a live stream production called Days of Resistance that will celebrate our collective struggle and draw a line in the dirt and challenge the old way of capitalistic thinking of profit over people, expose an absurdity of having money for war but can't feed the poor unless they are filling the largest prison systems in the entire world. Join us.
I get out with all your boxes.